Okay, here we are. Jim Gabriel, welcome to the listening.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for inviting me on.
So I've got, here's how I'm going to start it. Where are you? Because I like to know where people are, and it's good to sort of plug into where we are in the world.
Where we are in the world, I don't know the latitude, longitude coordinates. Unfortunately, that would be quite good if I could just give you those.
Precise digits.
I am in Bittering, next to Gressenhall, just north of Dereham in Norfolk. In a very quiet and relatively quiet and remote part of Norfolk. In England, planet Earth. Just in case anyone else is listening in.
Well, they may be. You know, it's good. It's good to be specific.
Yeah.
for the visitors. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's like really present for you right now today? What's kind of filling you up, occupying you? You know, where's your attention? What's going on for you right now today?
Right now today, I think I'm still I'm still processing big event from earlier in the week. Having witnessed some kind of some of the environmental sort of catastrophe that we're all sort of in some way, but having witnessing it firsthand on this week, kind of still processing that, I think, that which ties in with a lot of other stuff which is sort of going on. That's why it's particularly sort of significant, because it's very relevant to other things that are going on in my life and many other people's lives as well.
What was it in particular that happened then?
We went for a walk up at Cly, along the beach there, and saw dozens and dozens of dead seabirds and dead seal pups, and ones that are a seal pup, one that was dying as well. Saw the tide line that was just feathers, feathers and feathers and feathers all along the tide line. And I had anticipated potentially seeing a few, because I'd heard about this phenomenon on the radio a few weeks ago, and had heard what the cause of what it was, which was toxicology problem.
Oh, really?
Yes, to do with an algae bloom off the coast of Scotland, huge big algae bloom, and which is obviously working its way up through the food chain and has wiped out thousands and thousands of I think that most of them were further north than us, but it was said on the radio 2 or 3 weeks ago that some had been washed, even as far down as North Norfolk, but we saw dozens. And having heard that, and having sort of heard that, in the ether, and then come to see it, we didn't go up there we were up there to get away and to sort of get some clarity on some other issues, have a walk, let the dogs run free, and we couldn't let the dogs run free because they just wanted to eat these dead things. And it really kind of hit home, and then that links it, the cause of it links into exactly what we went to the beach to talk about, and what we were doing, which the cause of it is ultimately to do with nitrogen. If that is all correct, then it's to do with nitrogen, high amounts of nitrogen runoff, in the coming through the rivers. That's what feeds the algae blooms, and that starts in the soil.
So nitrates from farming, from fertilizing the land, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
so that go, and excessive, whether sewage dumping or whatever it is. But I think a lot of it is to do with the night, from fertilizing of both chemical and organic as well. And it ties in with we were going there to have a talk about the sort of we had a meeting with the farmer who's got with the field behind the house that afternoon. So we went to go and talk about our own intentions on that land and what we were going to do and what we were going to talk to the farmer about, and kind of had this whole thing unfold and realized that was what we were going to talk to the farmer about, because what we're doing there is about trying to find a way of living less destructively and more, in more harmony, and exactly addressing trying to exactly address these things in this very small way, i.e., how we grow, how we support ourselves, how we interact with our natural environment around us. So it was it was like, it was emotional, and it was poignant, and it was pretty cosmic as well.
This is a piece of land adjacent to your house where you are, that is owned by the farmer that are you renting? Am I right? You're renting
not
a bit of land.
not yet. No,
You're
we
talking
were
to him about it, right?
about moving. Yeah, we were we had a meeting at that afternoon, Monday afternoon, about moving forward, how we're going to move forwards with it, whether it would be rent or a lease or a buying, and but we weren't sure on what to. He'd been quite sort of standoffish before, and we weren't quite sure what to what to do, and what to talk about and how to talk about it, and it just became through through what we saw, and because happened to have heard the radio program about it and knew the origin, and that's exactly what we're planning to do. Or part of what we're planning to do there is to be growing things. That really kind of came back to that then was the main part of the conversation that we had, which was actually very heartfelt on all sides, and we really connected with him in a way. He really opened up with us and really connected with us, and we talked about our offspring, who are all sort of late teenagers now, young adults, who are all facing this and looking at it in a different way. We'd actually talked to my son, who's 16, the previous night, Sunday night, we'd asked him, or Amanda had asked him, what he thought about the future. And as she asked him, I was like, oh no. And he was almost in tears in his response. And to feel my son, with that level of emotion, about the sort of, not so much the anxiety, but the kind of feeling like, his thing was he brought up the issue of population, because that is one way of looking at, or one potential way of looking at the situation that we're in. And he said that he didn't think that he was going to be, he might not be able to have kids, or he would have to limit, so he expressed his sort of frustration and about the fact that he just wanted to be young, and a young adult doing what we did, and it's not there for them, and like that, and that was very moving as well. So having sort of those things gone on earlier this week, I'm still kind of really sort of processing what that means.
Interesting that it was there for your conversation with the farmer, because maybe if that hadn't have happened, you might not have unlocked that connection with him. So it may have been,
yeah that was
yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's my impression of, from the farming, the people in farming, in conventional farming that I know or have spoken to, is that most of the people who are farming, they know that it's fucked up what they're doing, but they can't do it any other way and farm. It's like
yeah,
there's this kind of horrible bind that they're in where they're economically obligated to farm in that way, because if they don't, they just won't be able to compete with
yeah,
anybody else at all,
yeah,
you know. And unless they're kind of particularly wealthy, the sort of conversion to organic is very costly and, you know, beyond most farmers. And you know, and there's a lot of questions about whether it's worth doing anyway
yeah,
for them, you know.
yeah,
So I really feel, you know, because they're often kind of targeted as kind of being part of the problem, but
mm,
really they're sort of trapped in it just like everybody else is, or they're up
yeah,
against it rather. I won't
yeah,
say trap, because there's, I think there are ways through, but so it's a hard place to be, especially if you've got a family obligation as well, like you're the sort of eighth generation who's farmed that land or something.
yeah,
And so you've got to hold on to it because there's this pressure. And so
yeah.
you've got to do what everybody else does to make it work so you can make a living. And that's a hard place to be, knowing
It is.
that what
Yeah,
you're doing, you know, that, I mean, I can't imagine what that's like, you know, to be kind of
yeah,
spraying Roundup everywhere, knowing how fucked up it is. And your own children are like being sprayed with
yeah,
it in a way, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
That's a horrible place to be. I have a lot of sympathy
mm,
for that,
yeah.
for those
He,
people.
yeah, yeah. He was definitely, he definitely, you know, you could see, you could feel his emotion. You could feel his, you could feel his concern. His concern for the younger generations. His, his awareness of the whole matter. And I mean, it's, there are a few, there's some brave farmers that do kind of try to do make the transition, and there's a company called Hodmedods who I don't know if you've come across them, who they help farmers transition by giving them, like, offering them minimum returns for like the first 3 years, so that they can guarantee whatever they grow, just guaranteeing them a minimum price, helping them transition to organic farming, and encouraging them to diversify with the crops, and growing field beans for human consumption, and growing marrowfat peas and lentils, and a lot of even quinoa,
Mm.
which is now extensively grown in the UK. But yeah, I think it's like change is, it's for all of us, it's painful, it's scary, and it takes leaps of faith, and sort of some courage.
Yeah, and always seems too slow. I mean, it is happening, isn't it? But it always
Yeah,
seems too slow. It's
yeah,
it's interesting that this came up at the start of this conversation, because I've been quite inspired the last few days, realizing that there's a really solid movement I feel growing all over the place, really, from what I can see, towards putting soil health and soil life at the heart of gardening. I mean, it's coming from a kind of gardening permaculture sort of universe, but
yeah,
there's also a kind of regenerative farming movement which seems quite strong in the States, and I'm imagining there's probably something like that sort of starting to build momentum here as well. And I had such a kind of clear realization myself in what I'm doing here on the land, that it's all about the soil. It's all about the soil life,
yeah,
and doing whatever we can do to make that strong. And then, of course, anything that grows in that soil will be healthy
yeah,
if the soil life is kind of put at the center. And it sounds really obvious, but we kind of moved away from that, especially in farming, but even
yeah,
in gardening.
yeah,
I grew up in a world where the tradition of gardening was all about that kind of control, spraying, putting Roundup on your lawn so
yeah,
all the weeds go, so it's nice and green, and spray, even the tradition of kind of growing fruit and vegetables, slug pellets and
yeah,
spraying fruit tree,
yeah,
that was the kind of way, wasn't it? But
yeah,
I
yeah,
really feel like it's there's a big movement away from that now, which
Yeah.
is very heartening. But yeah,
Well,
just that solid realization of it's the soil. It's all
yeah.
about the soil.
Yeah.
And if we look after that, the soil will regenerate and build up again. You know, all that erosion and
Yeah.
loss of soils, and it will soon come back if
It,
things change. You know, I know that how quick we can turn it around if we stop putting all this shit on the land and
yeah.
start kind of thinking, well, are there ways, or exploring and experimenting on the larger scale
Yeah.
with no till, and kind of, because that's
Yeah.
the biggest disruptor, of course, of the soil is ploughing it.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
It kind of fucks up the soil life.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are a number of, that along with kind of the, the application of the, pesticides and chemical fertilizers and things. It's the equivalent of kind of us just eating white sugar, and
Yeah.
expect, it's like it only works for a certain amount of time, and then you're just going to fall over. But what's interesting as well is how it's not just to do with what grows, but it's to do with now, and it's becoming more and more. We're all becoming more and more aware of how it impacts everything from the drain, the flooding, to do with the end of what they, to it's the drainage of the, not just the drainage of the land, which is important, because in the fields, if without proper drainage, then that causes a problem. So you get flooding in a way which it shouldn't happen, because there isn't. And then at the same time, when there isn't drainage, the water runs off very quickly and causes flooding in urban areas and causes big problems for human populations, and a lot of devastation. So, and then as my story just about it then leads into the sea as well. So it all seems to come back to this, to the soil. And then in terms of whether or not the scientists are right on the carbon question, but there's a huge amount of carbon to be sequestered back into soil with the addition of organic matter, which is not which is what is needed pretty much in every field that we see in Norfolk. Is not just the nutrient, but the organic matter, which is the kind of provides the structure for the funguses and the microlife. I had happened to kind of come across to being past some books quite a few years ago, and got heavily into kind of composting and understanding the microlife, and it blew my mind when I got into it, and the quantities of life that are in teaspoons of good garden soil, and the funguses and the amoebas and the all these little things, and that's what supports everything else on top. Everything bigger than that is supported by these by the microbes.
Well, it's the same in us, right?
It's the same in us. Yeah,
we are exactly the same. We're
yeah,
exactly the
yeah,
same.
yeah. Just a different format. It's really quite phenomenal. And when one starts to consider it in that way, and to consider that it's all just alive. It's not just some dirt and some mineral, and bits and bobs, but it's absolutely alive. It becomes, you can kind of get into it in a whole different way, have a whole different
Yeah, I mean, really inspiring, and it also, this sense of connection that comes from that is because we're inseparable, really. I mean, it's just an illusory thing that we're separate. There is that we're just this soup of life, basically, full of all these interrelated parts and bits, and you couldn't take, or trying to take life like a human out of the Earth's kind of influence or away into space. You suddenly realize just how difficult it is to sustain life well when the context is removed, because we are the context. We're kind of inseparable from it. And this is part of what really excited me, was that I realized that we are coming into a time when this is becoming more and more known and understood, and it's super inspiring. And to me, this is where all the solutions lie, is in the understanding and acceptance of this interrelationship, and bringing that kind of consciousness of that into what
Yeah,
we're doing will
yeah,
have rapid and massive effects for the good,
yeah. It's not just in our material world either, it's in our spiritual world as well. It's to once we identify with everything, that's the that's the path to enlightenment, apparently, is becoming universally identified, so that we're not as separate beings, but as we identify ourselves with everything, with the rest of the universe or creation or whatever, which Gaia, or whichever term you decide to use. So yeah, it's yeah, and I think the the hope is in the, just as we see this kind of things exponentially growing in crazy, in sort of catastrophic ways, the hope is in the awakening and the exponential growth of this awakening, and how that we cannot understand the once once there's a certain amount of people thinking in and understanding it, and none of us can see where that leads to. It's like it's the same as the AI quantum computing thing. It's like as individuals in our own mind, it's like it, we can't it's like trying to understand infinity. We can't do it. And that's why I think where the hope lies.
Yeah, I mean, it's super exciting, and there's such a wonderful, in a way, contrast in the crappiness of our culture now as it dies, and these old ways that don't fit anymore, that
Yeah,
most everyone has a sense of that now,
yeah,
that this
yeah,
way of life isn't working. So
yeah,
when the good stuff gets presented, it's so clearly different that it's, instinctively you just know, yeah, I want some of that because that
yeah,
looks and feels great.
yeah,
That's what I want. So, there's a kind of benefit in the way to the how terrible things become, because it creates a kind of greater potential energy for quickly moving away from it when something better is
yeah.
offered, whether that's on a personal level or communally or, nationally, internationally.
Well, in the end, sorry, I didn't mean, if it didn't, sorry, if did I cut you short there?
That's all right. There's
No.
time.
Uh, um, in a way, you could argue that it's necessary. It's necessary to get to this for this to happen.
Yeah.
Because without experiencing the the darkness, you can't experience the
Yeah.
light. It's the um, and we're just kind of wondering when when the yin does turn into the yang, or vice versa, whichever way around it's going. I think maybe it's going the yang turn to yin.
Yeah, I feel
But
like that. It's more that. That's my feeling. And well, the seed is always there, but it's kind of
yeah,
accelerating maybe.
yeah,
I feel like we're close to some kind of acceleration in that sense.
yeah,
It's been such a good, difficult, dark few years, really painful. I mean, maybe there's more of that to come. Who knows? There is also the kind of temptation for it to want it to come quick, but maybe it has to really get into the darkness to fully kind of, transition. Who knows? But in my own personal experience, I'm really feeling some turnaround in all that, in my own understanding, or
mm,
realizations in my relationship with the land here, and what I'm doing now moving forward, and how these kind of realizations and thoughts, and seeing other people kind of doing things along similar lines kind of seems to accelerate and support and help the whole thing.
yeah,
And there is a real sense, you kind of talk about the spiritual. I feel like this kind of the remembrance of the sacredness of things is coming back, because these are old, ways of relating to the world that have been
mm,
forgotten in our culture. But there does seem to be a sort of remembrance of that. And it's so exciting because the everyday, when it's acknowledged for its sacredness, suddenly floods your life with meaning,
Mm.
and the most humble tasks suddenly become acts of worship. And there's such a deep, gratifying sense of meaning that I
Yeah.
experience from that. And
Yeah.
it fills a lot of those kind of holes that we could kind of patch up with addictions. And it
Yeah.
really goes a long way, if not all the way, towards kind of filling that up.
Yeah.
Um, and that, that it's the meaning. I feel like this kind of finding meaning again. And for me, that comes as well as through kind of connecting with yourself, connection with place and land and the living world around you, and obviously then other people too.
Hmm.
And all of that seems to be interwoven in a
And the moment, it's, the meaning in the moment,
that's where it
because
lives, right? It lives
it's
in the
that's where
moment.
and it is in every moment, and that's our kind of challenge to find it in every moment. Um, and when we kind of, as we sort of move away from being less goal orientated, that becomes more, that's where we get left with, the moment. And then like you say, these humble tasks can become deeply sort of gratifying. And um, when you let go of remembering the massive long list of things that one has to do, and etc., and you just allow yourself to let go into the moment. And generally it brings a lot of, that's where you find it seems to bring the joy, and pleasure, because without that, the list is just there, and it's just like, and you're just trying to get through it. And that's when you're just wishing your life away, in a sense. You're um uh, but we in our text messages we mentioned time, and goodness, I mean, time seems to be just disappearing at the moment, like nothing else. So combined with this sort of, with our ambitions and our long lists, this absence, this time that seems to just not provide half of what it used to.
Mm.
um it's quite it's quite a thing to get your head to sort of to get through. And I think it just feels like, for me, at the moment, a constant letting go of that goal, and letting go of the thing that I wanted to do, and just trying to come back to that, because otherwise I'm finding myself very quickly, like, my mental state going downhill. But when I, like I just said, when I push that aside and just bring the focus back to the present and to what I'm doing, whether it's doing the dishes or whether it's, and realizing that this is, that actually it's all right. Actually, generally the moment by moment is okay.
Mm.
you know um but as soon as we start thinking about the future, and trying to plan anything or anything, everything starts to, and it starts to get quite complicated. um and and anxiety and fear seem to, spring up quite readily.
It's so interesting, that whole, it's hard to know, there's so much kind of relativity there in terms of, some of me, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. I'm having similar experiences. There's this personal sense of, maybe because I'm getting older, time is going faster, because perhaps my brain cycles are slowing down. So, I'm only conscious for like 20% of the second, and I used to be conscious of 50% or more, whatever it
Yeah.
was. So
Yeah.
that's one part of it that's possible.
Yeah.
And I always used to think, every year that you're alive, like, say you've been alive for 10 years, 1 year is a tenth of your life. Whereas if you've been alive for 50 years, 1 year is a 50th. So the
Yeah.
kind of the relativity there seems to change. But there is this sense of, when you are in temporal space, when you're in time, busy doing, and trying to get everything done and working through the list, it's like that place is getting faster and faster. But then you have those moments which are timeless.
Mm.
When you can drop into the moment, there's suddenly this vastness, this infinite space that doesn't feel like time at all.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting. It's almost like, and maybe the contrast between the two makes the being in the temporal place seem quicker than it actually
Mm.
is. You know, there's all
Mm.
these,
Mm.
but then there's a sort of general sense of maybe time speeding up anyway. But it's hard to gauge where could I stand or sit or be where I could get any kind of
It,
objective view of that,
it,
you know, because I'm
exactly.
in this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also we have to remember that it is a man-made thing. Time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a man-made concept, you know, and it's in an obviously based upon, you know, the natural, you know, cycle of the sun, and but the concept of time, you know, it is a
The counting of it.
it's
Yeah.
the counting of it, and
Mm.
you know, yeah. I would love to know how cultures and civilizations of the past had, you know, regarded time pre the, you know, the solar sort of 12-hour clock, and, you know, 24-hour clock, and, you know, 12-month calendar, and in the Islam, they use the moon cycle, so that the months actually rotate through the solar year, which gives a very different. So the years, the lunar year is slightly shorter, and it gives a different. Not that I would be able to say that I could understand what that's like, but for example, Ramadan moves backwards through the solar calendar by about 10 days every year,
right?
Which means that if you are, you know, if you're a practicing Muslim and you're fasting in Ramadan, and you live for around, you know, if you live for 40 years as an adult, then you're going to experience Ramadan in every you know, in every season, which yeah, I mean, it must, if you're fully living in that way, you know, it must have a different kind of bearing on the way you operate, you know.
Yeah, there's a richness of meaning there, you know, in that kind of the sense of the journey of your life kind of moving in direct relationship to these kind of cosmic forces, these massive
Yeah.
natural forces that you're, you know, an inseparable part of too. That, you know,
Yeah.
that really ties you in to
Yeah.
something quite profound.
Yeah.
In the sensory world, even, you know, that must be really interesting. And also to have that reference throughout your life, like, oh, that was the time that Ramadan was in the winter, or,
Yeah.
you know, having those kind of milestones
Yeah.
way, and the coloring of that changing over time. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I thought it was just the same every
Yeah.
year. Yeah. Mm.
So I mean, my mother became a Muslim. The reason I know is because my mum became a Muslim when I was 5. So I've kind of grown up with a bit of an understanding, and, you know, going to the mosque, and so now it's at the time of when it roughly when it was when I was young and I could remember. Or, yeah, so it's kind of in the, you know, in the early spring now, and kind of yeah.
Although on the other hand, there's something that I think is really quite powerful about the Christian idea of Lent
Mm-hmm.
being in the kind of lean time.
Yeah.
It's the early spring when there isn't a lot of food. You know,
Yeah.
nature, normally that would be a good time to fast, because you've probably eaten a lot of heavy, fatty food in the winter,
Yeah.
and now there's this kind of sort of spare time before things are fully growing.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the northern hemisphere, I'm talking about, obviously, but
Yeah.
that, you know, that makes a lot of sense. I can see how being in tune in that way
Yeah.
would be really powerful too. So I've never done that, but you know, as I get older, I'm sort of more aware of the meanings of these things, the deeper
Mm.
meanings, the sort of maybe even the pre-Christian meanings of why
Yeah.
these things happen.
I think
It
that
seems like a really good idea.
I believe that is a pre-Christian thing because I looked into it a while ago.
Well, I think
It's and
all of
the
these,
timing of that and the
yeah,
kind of the
Easter and
I think
Christmas
the
being
Lent,
winter
yeah, yeah,
solstice,
yeah,
they
yeah.
all are based on pre-Christian, of course they
Because
are.
it isn't the same in over in the Middle East, which is obviously where where Christianity has the origins are from, and the that the season is it's different over there. So it's these one of the I think one of these adopted things from the sort of paganism from before, which was deeply rooted in the land and the the natural world. That was the as far as I understand and what I understand about it. Um,
Well, and an
um,
interesting kind of crossover, the Christmas thing, the whole Santa Claus thing, um, the red and white of Santa Claus and the reindeers is very much kind of indicating this relationship with the kind of northern European, Russian,
mm,
shamanic traditions of
yeah,
using Fly Agaric, which red and
it,
white
yeah,
mushroom,
yeah,
reindeer eat it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's all you're
yeah,
flying with reindeer. This
yeah,
is gifts coming. This
yeah.
is it seems a little bit because otherwise it's bizarre.
I
And
know,
even the
I know.
elves, the
It's
elves kind of making
exactly,
stuff. It's
exactly.
all there. It's all there. It's fascinating
Well,
to me that and the bringing together with the kind of Christ birth as well, which and the solstice,
yeah,
the return of the light, the kind of the
exactly.
birth of the
Yeah,
light, basically.
yeah. Because again, as far as I understand, there isn't any movement on the zenith and during the from the solstice, which is on the 22nd, 21st or 22nd. As far as I understand, it doesn't visually move at all, the sun until Christmas Day.
There you go.
So which is the birth of the sun. Which is yeah, there's like the son of God or something, and that was the
Yeah,
rebirth
yeah,
of the
absolutely.
new solar the cycle, the new solar year, new cycle.
I mean, I
So
love that. I love that pause, the pause in the depth of
yeah,
winter there. I have to say,
yeah,
we incorporate that now in our own way into a sort of, I consciously, I kind of mark that day of the solstice, but I now try and empty that time just before Christmas to stop,
yeah,
because the world stops, the
yeah,
living world. There's a definite sense of the land pausing and everything on it as well.
yeah,
Because since I've lived, I'm into 18 years now, I think, here living in the woods, and
mm,
the new year starts on that first day, on
yeah,
Christmas Day, and it
yeah,
does. There's
yeah,
a change in the light in those
yeah,
first days of
yeah,
January. The
yeah.
birds, they sing in a different way. And there's a
Uh,
feeling, it's so quiet and it's so subtle. But even then, you can feel the new year growing in the land. And it's so
yeah,
inspiring to me now that once we've passed Christmas Day, I do actually feel spring, the very faint but definite
yeah,
turn and beginning.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's such a powerful magnet that pulls me out of the darkness of winter. And there's still that wonderful quiet time in January,
yeah,
February,
yeah.
which I also kind of make
I
use of and
I
honor
enjoy
on
that
the
time
holiday.
as well. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a wonderful time. There is
yeah,
a
yeah,
quiet there,
yeah,
but there's this growing sense of the return of the light, which is so uplifting. Because and that also, the reason to have a feast right
mm,
in the heart of winter
mm,
is so important, kind of for morale and for the sort of,
mm, mm,
I think that's why Christmas is so moving to
yeah,
me. It's a much deeper feeling of, it's a celebration of still being alive in the darkest hour,
yeah,
but also having got to that place where as from tomorrow
yeah,
we're on our way back and we made
yeah,
it this far.
yeah,
It really, it moves me quite deeply, Christmas. It's
yeah,
got powerful undertones, and kind of,
yeah,
there's things moving in it that
mm,
really touch me, I think. Mm.
yeah. it's we've sort of done a similar thing in terms of the kind of really slowing down by this winter solstice, and then just trying to really do nothing in that in between time. And I guess just what kind of saddens me a little is how sort of how little the world in general, or England in general, seems to, the sort of commercialism and the kind of it just keeps going. It's like as soon as Boxing Day, it hardly even stops for Christmas Day now, and I kind of always, and I sort of just always want it to like snow loads, and just for that, to stop everybody, because everybody loves it. Everybody loves it,
Yeah,
really. I know that.
I get a sense that it's quite hollow and forced, that continuing now, and it gets harder every year
Yeah,
to
yeah,
keep it going. Because I
yeah,
do feel like we're not alone. There's more and more people doing something or marking those kind of
mm,
calendar events that
mm,
are to do with the moon and the sun,
mm,
and feeling
mm,
I just, I mean, it's always hard to tell, isn't it, because you kind of only got your own reference point, but
yeah,
I definitely feel the hollowness in the sort of forcing of all of that other stuff, and how tired we are of that, of
yeah,
those hideous Christmas songs endlessly playing. We're so sick of all of that. We've done it so much to death.
yeah,
Even people who love it are probably getting sick of it now.
mm.
I don't know. That's my hope. I kind of feel like there's something going on there undermining
I
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, and I guess obviously the inner city experience is quite different. We are, we can't help but be touched by the natural world around us because of where we both live.
Sure.
Um, um, but I know that the last couple of years, I know that it's happening for a lot more people. A lot more people are making the effort to connect themselves with, and people in the cities getting out and connecting with nature,
And they're
connecting,
seeing it, they're seeing it on
yeah,
social media, because they're seeing people saying,
yeah,
"Oh, we're doing this thing for solstice," and "Oh,
yeah,
okay, what's
yeah,
that?" Or
yeah,
so it is kind of spreading
yeah,
and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've got to say, just sort of so grateful, really, for where I have been in the last 2 years,
Mm.
and that I haven't had to deal with the challenges that so many people have had to deal with, in terms of having lockdowns in flats, in inner cities, in all of that, and having to not just deal with themselves, but the other people around them, and the energy of other people around them. I know a few people who have been
Mm.
have definitely kind of become quite affected, and sort of in negative ways by the fear and anxiety that is, that they live amongst. And yeah, to be able to have not had that kind of that challenge has been a real blessing, and I'm just very
Yeah,
grateful for that. And
me too.
yeah,
I mean, there's a kind of sad irony to that, because that's the real pandemic for me,
yeah,
is the illness of fear, and
yeah,
all the pressure that happens to people, and sending people who are already under pressure because of the way the world is anyway, really
yeah,
sort of squeezing people beyond their limits. So
yeah,
feel for that, really do. And I think in a way that sort of, it makes me feel like that anyone who has got the great privilege to be in relationship with land, or has a place, and for me personally, I feel like it drives me even more to want to create a space where people can come to find that connection with the land,
yeah,
with
yeah,
themselves, with other
yeah,
people.
yeah,
And it really, I can feel the need for that
yeah,
generally.
yeah,
So it's kind of an inspiration, really, to sort of get into that more, and do what I can
yeah,
with what I've been given here, and my experiences, to sort of provide a place where that's possible, a haven, or somewhere where people can get out of the city, and just plug back in to something
yeah, yeah,
and holding, and
yeah.
I know you guys have got something very similar in mind
Yeah.
going on already. So
Yeah, and it's just wonderful when I mean, it must have been happening. I'm sure it's been happening for you already, but we've had people here, and particularly when it's young people, and they come here over the weekend, and also with as friends of Amanda's children, or not, they're not children, but like offspring or mine, and then they go away, and then we get a text message, and they say how that they're cooking they were inspired, or they're doing something different, and it just makes it feels really good in the right way, not in not in the sort of egoic gratification, but in the like, oh, maybe there is some relevance to what we're doing, and that's certainly the kind of real inspiration at the moment, to, like you say, to keep going, and to do the best that we can, but in that as well, become the best that we can as individuals. I've never felt it so strong in all my life, to kind of the need to really to step up to to being the best that I can. Not there aren't any corners, the corners of that one can hide behind, in terms of sort of like the procrastinating of which we do in all of our own unique ways, and we all do it, and they seem to be getting fewer and fewer, those those places where we can sort of like hide and sort of think, oh, we'll just do that tomorrow, or whatever it is. And it's like, no, it's needs to be done now. There's maybe it's to do with age and the getting older, but I think it's more to do with the time that we're in. I feel I feel that
all, perhaps a mix of it all. Yeah,
yeah,
I relate to that for sure.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
the sort of bullshit stories, they can't
yeah,
be told or lived anymore.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
almost impossible to continue.
yeah,
The world just keeps slapping them down and saying no.
yeah,
Thank God. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to have a look at the time.
Yeah, I think we're on the hour now, so
We're pretty
there's
much
so
on the
much
hour.
we can get into. I mean, this is part one.
Yeah,
We'll definitely
yeah,
do a
I'd
bit
look
more.
forward to revisiting this. And like I say, maybe we can change the format, and we could have a fire and put the I don't know if that work if that's allowed, if that's
Maybe
uh,
there's sort of a whole series of
of
in-person. Um,
yeah,
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 because I mean,
yeah,
it's the obvious thing here is to light a fire and sit down
and
and do it
yeah,
that way. But yeah, no, I like it. Maybe we'll do a kind of outside broadcast.
outside, maybe an outside. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's see. Um, well, really nice to talk to you,
yeah.
and
Thanks for that.
yeah, uh, um,
Pleasure.
and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Definitely. All right.